Hey everybody, it's Bevin. Welcome to my podcast, Bevin, a femme over 40 and her friends. I'm your host, Bevin. I've said my name 3 times. It's time to start the show. My co-host Biscuit Reynolds is in spirit, so he is joining me and joining you wherever you are, because he is metaphysically just everywhere. Today, I am responding to listener questions that I got through my Instagram stories, but I want to remind you that you can reach me at any point at fatkiddanceparty@gmail.com if you have questions. I can answer on a solo episode and or have expert folks join me on my podcast to answer your question. I would love to serve. And this podcast is really my gift to the world to help folks in the world, you and everyone who cares to listen, understand that there are many, many millions of ways to be a happy, successful adult. I wish I could say billions, but I think just so many people are not choosing or don't have access to the privilege of choice to lean into who they really are. So there could be 8 billion ways to be a happy, successful adult. And yet we're working on it. Okay. This is my Happy Pride episode, although every single episode is a Happy Pride episode. So I'm putting on my little rainbow shawl as though we're at a Pride event together. My favorite kind of Pride events are more chill storytelling events anyway. And I got a couple of great questions. But first, I want to tell you the best way to support this podcast and to make sure that I'm able to keep supporting this podcast and my vast digital archives, which is kind of the quote unquote brick and mortar expense of running the kind of businesses I run, is my Patreon page, Patreon, patreon.com/FKDP, which stands for Fat Kid Dance Party, which is my aerobics class for anyone who feels left behind by mainstream fitness. If you've ever been called too much, too fat, or felt too awkward to dance, mine is the supportive class for you. I have options to join my Zoom aerobics classes from wherever you are all around the world. And I have on-demand classes. So if your schedule is just like whenever I can get a workout in, I have so many options now. I'm so excited about the breadth and depth of work I've been able to create because of my Patreon page. I can draw a direct line from to work I'm creating today to all the support I've had over the last, I think it's 5 years that I've had a Patreon. Maybe it's 6. It might be 6. Anyway, I'm so grateful for everyone, past, present, and future, who has supported my Patreon page. But I have like so many cool things. I just did a whole series of grief stretch classes over the winter. So I have a whole repertoire of those if you're grieving. It's a super great song and many different versions of the song to feel your feelings to and to kind of get connected to what is wanting to come out. And you can invest 11 to 15 minutes to your feelings. You know what I mean? I think we all could benefit from that. And I'm pointing at myself as much as anyone else, right? Like just setting aside that time to connect to what's coming through your body. I also have workout videos, like full dance aerobics, up to 55-minute classes. I have chair aerobics classes. Those are all about 20 minutes. I have some lower tempo classes for folks who just need to take it a little easier. I have just 20-minute dance classes, which is a really zippy way to like do your cardio. It makes such a huge difference in your body to do some cardio like 2 to 3 times a week. And my favorite stat about diabetes actually is that it's a 5% weight change that can drastically change whether and how you have active diabetes in your body. I read that and it's so true. And it's not a lot of work, actually. It's not that much change in your life to make a 5% weight change. And I think for those of us who've been very traumatized and wounded by diet culture and the consistent failure of diets to work the way they're supposed to control your body, to create thinness, when in fact, human diversity is body diversity, and everyone has a different body, and like 90% of your experience of your weight has to do with your ancestors and your genetics. And, think about adipose tissue and how that kept people alive in harsh winters before we had climate control in our homes and hot running water. So anyway, this body is built to survive. And it felt like a failure my whole life. But when I was a very young person, young adult, about 22 years old, I decided to be on a journey to change my mind about how I felt about my body and my life. And I have, over the last few decades, learned a lot. And my goal is to help you learn to regard your body and yourself with love and grace. And the fastest way I can do that is actually through aerobics, because we learn so much faster through play. and movement than we do through just reading or listening, although those things help too. So just you being in this podcast, I can help you here, but I can really help you if you join me on the dance floor. So it's my plug for my Patreon. I also have a spiritual lessons tier that I just launched where I am putting all of the work I've been doing over the past few years, teaching people about my self-care practice and spirituality and how those things weave together. And I mean, it's just been a call from spirit for me to really intensify doing that work. And what's funny is like, I'm connecting with more and more people in my life who are like, I'm on a spiritual journey now. And I'm like, this is why spirit is having me do this, because more people are on spiritual journeys and they need folks to learn from. That's how I created my spiritual path. It's just literally learning from people, taking what I like, leaving the rest, and cobbling it together. And now I have an incredibly spiritual life. But I'll talk more about that in a little bit in this episode. If you want to support and you don't want a membership, you can also just send me a tip. There's some things in the show notes that the PayPal, Venmo, Buy Me a Coffee is like a great site to just buy me a snack. I don't drink coffee. I miss it. I miss coffee, but I had to give it up. My body was like, no more. So that's my one advertisement. I don't do brand partnerships really. I just partner with my own stuff, and I just want to help serve and help you live a better life. And okay, so today's episode is about coming out, and such a great topic too for this time of year, Pride Month. I'm so grateful for all of my queer and decolonial ancestors who helped pave the way. I saw a great quote that talked about how it's not like systems of power handed you your rights. Like, it was actually people you probably wouldn't associate with doing things you would have distanced yourself from over time that cajoled those systems of power to relent. And as fascism is rolling back a lot of our hard-won rights in the country that I live in, the United States, I think it's so important for us all to step up a little braver and to be that person to help kind of eradicate fascism, because like Nazi Germany happened because a lot of people, quote unquote, decent people, stayed silent. And imagine if there was a groundswell against what Hitler was bringing. Just saying, like, it creeped on them. Like, history repeats itself. That's not the purpose of this podcast, but I just want to encourage you. Coming out comes in a lot of forms. Okay, so one question, I had two questions about coming out, so it's kind of cool. I love when the reader questions sync up. In honor of Pride Month, what's your coming out story and how has it shifted over the years? And this other question I thought was really cool about coming out. I live in a small community and feel like I'm in the closet as being a fun, interesting, magical person. Have you always presented all of your sparkly wonderfulness to the world? Or do you have a coming out story for your fullest expression? Everybody, it's so real. It's all intertwined. Everything is intertwined. My coming out story, I kind of prefer to tell the story in terms of my first love story, which is really like why I came out. But I'm going to save that because I want to preserve my first love's privacy. And so I'll tell that story on Patreon. So I'll have it behind that wall of privacy. So me and the besties over there can hear it. I'll tell it just like if you were a friend of mine asking me this and we were having coffee or tea for me, coffee for you, your beverage of choice. I would tell you the whole love story. But my coming out story, basically, I didn't know gay was a thing you could be until I was 14 years old. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, surrounded by gay people. And my mother left my abusive dad. He was violent with her a few times, and she was like, yeah, he's going to go after Bevin next. I'm out. And I am so grateful for her bravery in that because it was really hard. Like in the early 80s, like you still couldn't get a credit card on your own without a man, like there was so much that made women have to depend for their material needs on men. And so my mom making that brave choice to leap away into the uncertainty with a little Bevin, like she describes me when I was little as like very loving. And I love that. But I also was like a persistent question asker because I'm just very curious by nature. And like, I can imagine like, I just had a lot of needs. And at hindsight, like I did not get all of my emotional needs fulfilled, but at least my material needs were met. And that was even hard. So my mom left my dad and she started dating women. And I'm still not fully sure what like her realization was, or like how she went into that. I should ask her that. Again, I'm sure she's told me, but like we didn't have that kind of relationship growing up. So I didn't know like all this stuff. So my mom dated women for like 3 years, I want to say. And then when I was 4, maybe 2 years, it was only 2 years. And when I was 4, she like had a really terrible experience in a relationship with a woman, just didn't feel like she could trust women anymore. And so she started dating men again. So I was not conscious of her relationships with women. So even though I had a gay mom, I did not know what gay was, because also media was entirely silent about gay things, or like that gay even existed. And when you don't know it exists, you can't know it's possible for you unless you are a true visionary and you have the confidence to lean into what you can't see. And I think that's my work as an artist and as someone who, I mean, this is why like studying Prince Rogers Nelson has been so helpful for me as an artist, because he really had a strong vision for what he wanted to create. And I think that has emboldened me to lean into things I haven't seen before and to create things on earth that haven't existed before. Like a fat aerobics instructor, like I never thought that was a thing I would be, but yet here I am. It was like the natural progression for me as a drag performer, because like it's just a 55-minute drag show, like where it's audience participation. Anyway, so I didn't like total media blackout, didn't know about gay stuff from mainstream media. And so when was I 14? Early 90s. So it's the early 90s, and I'm at Girl Scout camp, where it was very homophobic at Girl Scouts, by the way. Like you could not talk about gay stuff. Like now they're posting pride stuff on their Instagram, and I'm happy for all the Girl Scouts now. But as a young closeted queer in Girl Scouts, they're homophobic environment, it's just real, harmed me. And but I'm not mad. I'm grateful for all the empowerment I got from Girl Scouts, and I'm grateful that now they're living in alignment with their values. But there was a lot of like queer adults I could have been exposed to and understood about queerness if I had understood that they were like married to each other. You know what I mean? Or like, not, we didn't have gay marriage back then, but marital relationships, yada yada. Okay, so I'm 14. I'm at Girl Scout camp. One of my fellow counselors in training says to me, "Oh, so and so, like a counselor, is gay." And I was like, "What's gay?" And she explained that, and I was like, "Wait, women can love each other and be in relationships with other women? What?" And so that was like a light bulb, right? A moment of like, oh. And then here's what I had started having crushes on guys when I was a preteen, probably. My first crush was Ryan Lambert from Kids Incorporated. And I just want to say, ironically, I live near Port Townsend, Washington, where he works at the local movie theater. So I'm just saying, like, how funny. When my friend told me, "Have you ever heard of Ryan Lambert?" And I was like, "Have I heard of Ryan Lambert?" So like, right, like I love a performer. I love a guitar. I don't know. I can't even explain it. I don't see it now, but I saw it then. And I trust every version of myself is doing the best I could to have the glimmers that I was having. My first crush on like someone I knew was a boy in my 7th grade class. He turned out to be a drug dealer later in life, which like, now I use cannabis. So like, I don't know what kind of drugs he was dealing, but anyway, I don't, but everybody's got to hustle. And the last I heard of him was from someone about that like 15 years ago. And then, so like having crushes on guys was super easy because like that's what everyone else was doing. And I can also see like a thread in every crush I've had. It's like there's something about that person that I admired. And so now that I understand that, like when I'm feeling a crush towards someone, which is rare actually these days, but like when I'm feeling crushy energy towards someone, I'm like, there's something I'm meant to learn from this person. So I always pay attention to like, what is it that I admire about someone? And how can I amplify that in me? Because if I'm admiring it in someone else, it's something that wants to wake up in me. And I think my ideal true love romance would be someone who really like sparks my brain and like is continually inspiring me, and someone that I just like want to get to know continually as they evolve over time, right? And I have a whole episode about what is true love? Is true love a scam? That's from the end of January of 2024 this year, if you want to listen to that. I really liked that episode. That was another listener question. That was a good question. Okay, so I knew that gay was a thing. I was having crushes on boys. So I didn't think anything of it. And then like when I was 16, again at Girl Scout camp, and I was on a session break. So I was out driving in my friend's minivan with a bunch of us. And I remember we were like, the sunroof was blowing. We're like driving around Marin County, California. That's where my camp was. And blasting Closer to Fine. I couldn't make this up, and I'm so grateful this is how it went down. But blasting Closer to Fine, and I just like made the realization, like it was like a switch flipped, and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely queer. I definitely have a crush on this woman in camp. Like it was just so clear to me, and I didn't have the language of queer yet, right? So I definitely thought I was bisexual at the time. I don't like that term. It's not really resonated with me since I got the term queer. It was like when queer happened, it was like, oh, this feels like home to me. And like, I didn't get that language until I was about 22. So, but in the meantime, like before that, I identified as bisexual because like I had real legitimate crushes on men. I am so grateful. I never had to date any, even though that's all I wanted when I was a teen. Sometimes life's rejection is God's protection. And I know a lot of queer women friends who are like, yeah, I spent a lot of time dating men foolishly, and consequences of that, by the way, which, you know, penises make babies. And so anyway, but I'm glad my mom dated my dad because I'm glad to be here. Hi, everybody. I'm glad I'm on Earth. So, okay, so I came out to myself. I had a crush on this other counselor. Nothing about that ever went away. But the thing I admired about her was how brave she was. And it's funny because she also looks kind of like a couple of women I dated. So it's kind of funny how, like, you know, like Keanu Reeves was my big crush in high school. I have like 50 something pictures of Keanu Reeves in my bedroom. And I'm genuinely surprised I still haven't met him in life. I just feel like law of attraction. But I will say my last long-term partner looks kind of like a little butch Keanu Reeves. So that's a type I have. There's a few other little types I have. But okay, so I come out to myself at 16. This is the summer before my senior year in high school. I sort of had a little crush on our class president, but I never would have done anything about it at the time. I just kind of went back to school, and I didn't come out. I came out to somebody. I had a long distance pen pal. It's a story for another day. I came out to him, and that was it. I didn't come out to anybody else. And I wish I had come out to more people? No, because I didn't feel safe. You know, like there was one out person during high school who like came and went. He was only in town for a semester, but he was really fun. But like now there's like, for my graduating class, I know of at least 10 gays who are practicing gays. And there's like a bunch of people who have come out at some point, but who are married to like in straight relationships. So whatever, not my business. But it's interesting too to like carry like an attraction to like a queer attraction, right, in life. And like when I'm attracted to men, which is not frequently, I find it a queer attraction coming from in me because like everything about me is so queer. But like I know it vexes some people, and there's an episode coming up on my podcast where I interviewed a friend whose primary relationship right now is straight, and she's a little vexed by it. But there's some wrestling that comes with being attracted to men and people who are socialized as cis men and who live as cis men, right? So anyway, that's another topic for another day. But I'll say like my attraction to men really kind of held back my awareness of my queerness and like also the circumstances of the time to like not know it was an option for me. But my heart, she's a rager. Like my heart is like the song Wild Heart by Stevie Nicks, especially the version on YouTube. It's like from a Rolling Stone shoot. She's just singing to this piano while she's getting her makeup done, and it's extraordinary. And it's just like, blame it on my, there's a reason. Don't blame it on me. Blame it on my wild heart. Like that's how I feel. Like my friends who can have casual sex, I wanted that for me for so long, and then I realized that's just not how I'm wired. Like I'm just like I really love ferociously. I can fall in love in a night, like and so it kind of is why like I didn't come out until I was in love with somebody. And I also like truly believed in my body. Oh, there's a deer that just walked by. That's really precious. I also truly believed in my body that I wasn't desirable as a fat person, and that there was no point in me coming out because who would want to date me or have sex with me anyway? And that was a thought that ran through my mind a lot, and it was something I truly believed about myself. And there's a lot of trauma from believing yourself as undesirable that that I had to unlearn and release. and process. And so that really kept me in the closet. And I was like, I'm already fat. You know what I mean? Like, are we going to add queer to this? And so, yeah, we are going to add queer to this. You know what I mean? Like, it turns out life is great. Like, no regrets. Like, I'm kind of glad I'm fat. Like, honestly, having the perspective of a body that's not attractive to cis men and being chronically underestimated has made me stronger and better. And I've been reflecting actually with a couple of friends who are like very famous fat people, and like in the fat liberation space. And like, um, I think it has affected the way I'm able to get in front of people that like I'm not straight. And I'm not going to say it's held me back. I think it's made me relatable to fat queers specifically, but like there is something to watching someone like get a ton of attention and followers and connection in the world with straight privilege and then come out. You know, it's just a different journey, and we all have our own journeys, but like I know that has, it's like, I don't know, I think like, and I think being fat, like, I don't know, I think being fat makes me iconic and unusual and spectacular and a good example to people that like you can love your body and perceive yourself as desirable. And I just want to make it very clear, I know how hot I am. And I also know that I'm a specialty food. That was something a date told me once, that they believed they were a specialty food, but like the people they were for, they were really for. And I kind of vibe that myself, you know, like I am like not for everybody, thank God, you know, like who I'm for, I'm really for. And like that's not just in attraction. I think that's also just in personality and like anaerobics, you know what I mean? A lot of people want to be berated about their body in order to move and to hustle on the dance floor. Whereas I'm like, you did the work by showing up here. All you have to do is sit and cheer along. Like you don't have to perform for this class. Like I want you to do it how it feels good in your body, right? Like, so I think there's something to being a specialty food and owning that and kind of coming out as like magical, like our dear gentle reader, listener. I just wanted to be all Bridgerton, dear gentle listener. But like being in a small community and being in the closet as being a fun, interesting, magical person, like once you really own who you are, like the whole world lights up around you. Like confidence is catching, it's magic. And like there's no one else who can do you. And our belonging is held hostage to our conformity in this society. And so like I can see people like having felt like I can't follow Bevin on Instagram when my name on Instagram used to be Queer Fat Femme, because my blog is queerfatfemme.com. Because when I started my blog, there was no one except Beth Ditto who was like out as a queer fat femme, right? Like that I knew of. Like so many people are out now, and I'm so grateful for that because there's so many examples, because there is no queer fat femme that's alike, you know. But like here I am just trying to show you what's possible, because for me, until I saw what was possible, like I fell into the right friend group. That's how I ended up really becoming myself and becoming that sparkly version of me that you see today. I'm telling this ADHD disjointed story. We're going so many places, but when I was 22, it was like a second coming out. And because like I met people, my drag king troupe that I was in, and I just like I volunteered for the Philadelphia Dyke March to plan their fundraiser. So they were doing an annual fundraiser, the Mr. Philadelphia Drag King contest. And my first time ever in drag was so bad. I was wearing a trench coat because I thought it would like look fun, and it was an easy thing I had to wear. And I looked like I smelled bad. You know what I mean? Like that was the masculinity I was presenting. It was not a masculinity I was going for, but like I had like patchy facial hair. It was not cute. And I worked the door at like the major dyke hangout in 2020. I think it's 2021. But you know, right? You can't steer a parked car. You just got to start somewhere. And eventually, I don't think I ever got great at drag aesthetic, but like my aesthetic matched the kind of cartoon masculinity that I wanted to present over time. But God, falling in with like a bunch of artists and activists who like saw all bodies as good bodies, like it was catching. And I was like, what? I can be a babe and fat at the same time? Like no one had ever told me that. I never knew fat people who loved their bodies and like were like defiant against diet culture. I didn't even know what diet culture was. And the same group introduced me to people who were going to a fat queer conference called No Lose, which was happening. It began as the National Organization for Lesbians of Size, and it's since evolved to be for all genders. I think it's just fat and queer people now, but I haven't been involved in 15 years, but maybe 10 years. I don't know. 15 years, I think. My last no list was like 2010, so 14. Anyway, but it was really radical for me to be around fat liberation people and learn all of that stuff. So I kind of came out as fat, queer, and femme all at the same time, because this same group also was the first group I'd ever been in where femme was a good thing, and femme was just a way people could be. And I had heard you're a lipstick lesbian from someone when I first came out, that in a very kind of derogatory way. And like, poor baby Bevin, so much style that I did not have yet. Style is being yourself on purpose. And that is where you come out as your magical, sparkly self, is through personal expression and style, not just your aesthetic style, but also the style of how you are in the world. I really think like, I really believe strongly in just risk being yourself, being your sparkliest, and people will vibe out who are boring and beige, and people will really vibe you who are glitter and excited and like want the permission to like be that way themselves. Imagine how many people in your small town are weird. I live in a very small town. Like, I kind of just see, I live in the forest, but like my like town that I orient towards is a half an hour away in Port Townsend. And like, it's like I swoop in like this magical witch from the woods. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like here wearing my outfit. Like, I have going to town aesthetic, and I don't hide any part of myself. It feels a little dangerous because we live in a very purple area, very kind of red tinged area in a time of fascism. And yeah, it's just, I take those risks, and part of like coming out is taking a risk. It's vulnerable. Um, okay, so I was lying to myself about my body, my desirability. I had like come out to a few, very few close friends, like a couple. Um, like the first 2 years in college, I was still in college. So I came out, I was thinking I wanted to come out the summer before my junior year of college. Like, it was brewing, and I had come out to like my core group of camp friends that summer. I was a counselor that year. And like, it was just feeling, the more I practiced coming out to my friends, and the better, like the more chill they were. And I'm so grateful. Like, I've never come out to someone who was like weird about it. They might have been lying to me to my face and been uncomfortable, and I don't care, because it's not my responsibility to manage their feelings. But they yeah, I got a lot of good support from friends, and it was kind of no big deal. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I get to college my junior year, and like the day that I was a resident advisor, and the day that the residents moved in, I met the first love of my life. And I remember the moment I saw them for the first time. And it's funny because I didn't know what that feeling was at the time, but now that I've had it a few times, it's like when somebody catches my spirit, and I know, oh, it's on with this person, whether that happens now or later, it's on with that person, right? And so it's been the first time I've met a few people. It's been before I've met somebody before. It has been with my last partner, it was like the fourth time we met. The first three times I didn't even remember having met them before. I laugh because she's got an ego. Anyway, all that to say, like, sometimes someone makes a strong fourth impression. Sometimes someone makes a strong impression before you've even met them. I had an internet crush on somebody, and then I dated them 10 years ago, 10 years later, which was now 10 years ago. It was so funny. It was, anyway, so I dated my resident, which like my boss had said specifically, don't date your residents unless it's real love. And it was very much real love. And the moment we started dating, I told everybody, because I wasn't like Buddy the Elf, I'm in love and I don't care who knows it. That's just who I am and how I am. So that was coming out. It was very easy because I was in love and I was just having all these big feelings. So I really didn't care. And like, there's something about passion that like makes you more resilient to like what other people think. And I think it's like a lifelong practice, because again, we have a human need for belonging, and our conformity is like what opens up the ability for that belonging. And I think for the small town person, like, again, like if you want to fit in with boring people, is it fun for you? You know, like, that's just a question for me. Like, I love getting dressed up. I love being my most magical, sparkly self. And that's kind of what happened when like the fat, queer, femme, like stuff just kind of synced together. And it was like this light bulb aha moment. Like, oh my God, I get to be this like radiant version of myself. And like, I am Bevin. And it's like I am putting out rainbow prisms. And I don't mean rainbow like a gay way. I mean like rainbow like a spiritually powerful, prismatic, like I'm going to change how you see yourself sort of way because you know me. Like I am an alchemist. And like the more, and this is, I have had to come out too. Like there's so many coming outs I've had in life, like coming out using cannabis. That was a huge moment for me. Like remember, I didn't really start smoking, and I didn't start really using cannabis until I was in my mid 30s. And thank God, my prefrontal cortex was already developed. My lungs were already developed, which doesn't happen until you're 25. Like I just can't imagine how I would have derailed my life if I had started smoking weed earlier. But it was so helpful for my healing, just physically, because I was like suffering so deeply from IBS, from my legal career. And also just like emotionally, because I just had a big spiritual healing that I was doing that has taken like 14 something years. Like my spiritual journey since I've been 31, when I really decided I was going to try believing in God. Wow, it's been extraordinary. But like sometimes shifting your reality is hard, and sometimes cannabis is just a soft way to deal with that. I've also had to grieve a lot in my life, and I find cannabis is like such a good grieving helper. So like when I moved to California from a prohibition state, which was New York, I started smoking more weed and like and consuming more weed in general, not just smoking. And it's been so therapeutic for me. And I wasn't talking about it intentionally on the internet because I was like, well, it's illegal most places, you know, even though I had my medical card in California, so it was a prescription. But there's still a lot of stigma around it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to put my personal brand on there because, like, what about brand partnerships and things like that, right? And then in 2018, I taught aerobics at my first Flow and Goddess Getaway, which is a cannabis retreat for women identified people. And it like I was just like, I'm going to talk about this, and so I will therefore now be out about cannabis smoking. So that was another coming out moment. Um, and let's see, really big coming out moment was coming out as like with my spirituality, talking more about like how much my spirituality is a part of my day-to-day life, which is God, yesterday. I had a reading with my friend Chrissy Tolley, who's been on this podcast many times. Hi, Chrissy, if you're listening. She's talking about like me coming out more as like a spiritualist and not focusing because I've been really doing this thing where I'm um, releasing my job as my identity, like being an aerobics instructor, and I put that in quotes, was like such an easy thing for me to say because I wasn't a lawyer in quotes anymore. And I really like never thought through how like I was assigning so much value to an identity as my vocation, which is not the most important thing I do. But like to be honest, like the aerobics are only about a fifth of what I do in the world, you know, like for money and in like the vibrance of the world, right? So but spirituality and like, you know, witchcraft, if you want to call it that, like I would say being a witch is like a woman who's unafraid of her own power, right? That's one definition I've heard, but I don't think it's just women who can be witches. But like, you know, it's like it's kind of like how queer has stigma attached to it, fat has stigma attached to it, and you can reclaim it. Witch has stigma attached to it, so I kind of like it to reclaim it. But like witchcraft is just anything you do to connect to spirit. And like, and it's nothing, I don't do anything against anybody. I understand that energy comes back to you tenfold. And personally, I'm about pushing out that light, happiness, joy, benevolence for everyone so that that comes back to me tenfold. Thank you. So it's interesting because like you grow up afraid of witches because they want to make women afraid of their own power. Because we have I mean, not just women, but everyone has so much power available to them. Like part of coloniality, the whole point is disempowering people. So, and it's severing their connection to the land and nature around them, which I just want to remind everyone, when you hear bird song, your bones feel that because birds sing when they're safe. And so if you're not hearing birds singing, look around and consider what's going on, right? But like when you go outside and you hear the bird song, your bones chill out. Like your whole nervous system knows, like, oh, it's okay right now, right? Like that's just a little basic thing. But I was talking about this last night, like, oh, yeah, actually everything I do is witchcraft. The way I dress, it's glamour, right? Like, and my aesthetic, how I walk around in the world, like my altar work. And I talk a lot about all these things I do in my spiritual self-care course. that's available through my Patreon. There's a new Patreon feature coming out where you can just like buy a collection of things, I think. That hasn't been released, so I don't know how it's going to work, and I'll talk about it on the podcast. But if you are not the membership kind, but want to get access to that, I'm going to try to make that possible. So, because I want people to like be good spiritual stewards of what they have available. And I'll put a link to this in the show notes. There is a thing I have for free on my Patreon about how to clear your energy, and energetic hygiene, just some basic energetic hygiene. It's like taking a shower for your aura. I do it multiple times a day. I have not ever done it so much as I have in the last even week, like how many times a day I'm doing it. But like I need to, the negative energies are like are around, and I'm not trying to have my energetic field sullied by anything. So I want that for you. If there's anything I could teach you about spirituality, it's cleaning your funky aura. You just clear it out, right? I had a healing this weekend with my friend Manda, a very powerful Reiki healer. She was on my podcast recently. And she went through and checked all my chakras, and she's like, they're all open. And I was like, that's right. Because like I used to get healings and there'd be something, usually your throat chakra. On my clients, when I do Reiki healings, I'm a Reiki master. That was a big moment. Like being a Reiki master, I was like, well, I guess I'm believing in this power that's unseen. But anyway, so like all of this is all together. Usually people's throat chakra is blocked. I'm a big fan of a primal scream in the woods. Just holler it out. It's very helpful. Okay, so coming out of spiritual was like slow but steady, but I remember the first time I ever used the term psychic to refer to myself. And then I had a really great reading with Robin Doxey where she said, Bevin, you're as psychic as they come. And I'm like, if there's anyone I believe about that stuff, it's Robin. She's so powerful. If you haven't had a reading with Robin Doxey, put it on your bucket list. She is great. And she sees the way she's a seer, the way she sees people. And it's kind of funny. I don't know a lot of psychics who don't remember their readings, but Robin's one of them. So it's kind of funny because it's just between you and her. And so I'm so glad I recorded my reading because I get something out of it every time. But yeah, anyway, so coming out is like a constant thing. And like, and also as a femme, like people do not clock me as queer who are not also very queer themselves. I think like I present as a queer femme to other people who are a queer femme, but I think, and recently a couple of people asked me to define queer and femme for them, and I will do that here because I think that's helpful. I like the definition of queer that's like in opposition to everything heteronormative. Like we're expected and told there's just one way to love and be, and that's not it. Like there is a myriad of ways to be and love in this world. And when you choose love over fear, you open up a path to miracles. And being queer has been a miracle in my life. I like the definition of femme as also like kind of similar to femininity, but like not for the male gaze, just for self-expression, and an expression of the divine feminine within. And femme is not it is a gender expression for me, but it's not for an assigned sex at birth gender type thing, right? Like it is for a myriad of identities. You can use any pronouns and be femme. And I think both there's no gatekeeping for queer and femme either. Everyone is welcome, right? Like that's the whole point, like of having a big table. Like I want a house with a crowded table, and a place by the fire for everyone. And it's kind of funny too when I think about like my job as my identity, because when I think about my dreams, like my biggest dream is to like meet and marry the love of my life and like create an incredible family with them and have like really fun kids that I get to really pour into, and to get to continue to express my work and my words in the world. Like that's my dream life, and so those are things like I have no control over, but the part about expressing my work and my world and my words to the world, I can control that. So, and like to keep getting better as a human. And my last little point I want to make is that recently a straight person, was like a straight friend of mine was like talking about, like playing around with having a crush on that. She wasn't playing around with having a crush, but she was like playing around with the idea of like, oh, like, I just want to have this like relation. I don't know. It was like kind of playing around. I will characterize it as, I forget how she said it. She's playing around with having a crush on a mutual friend who's queer. And I was like, you know what I mean? Like, I was just kind of like, why, because I kind of hate when straight people like objectify and cosplay as queer, you know what I mean? Like as a person with a marginalized identity that has cost me lots of money, you know, like multiple layers of marginalized identities that has cost me money and opportunities. I get grumpy about it, but then you know, there's the ego self and there's the higher self, and like sometimes the ego's what charges in. And then as I was contemplating it later, I was like, oh, maybe this is like a soft coming out. Maybe this is just because part of developing identity and figuring out if it is for you, if it does represent you, is just trying it out. That's, again, you can't steer a parked car, so kind of you got to like see how it feels. You know what I mean? I kind of like when someone's struggling to make a decision, I like to counsel them to like, well, why don't you make the decision and give yourself 2 weeks to just see how it feels for you in your body? For me, like when something's right and resonant, it feels like a relief, and it feels right and resonant, you know, like everything feels like, oh, better in my body, even though it's scary. Because like if you haven't done something before and you haven't identified as some way before, it is scary, and colonialism makes it like coloniality makes it scary for you because you are losing out on quote unquote safety, which is again perceived safety, by choosing that, right? And so I think there's something to just sensing in your body the distinction between I'm scared because this is new, and this feels off and wrong, right? Like living a good life is about kind of not needing to know, right? Like allowing the great mystery of life to unfold, because life is just figuring itself out. It's kind of being okay with like a generalized low level anxiety about things, because you don't know what's going to happen. Uncertainty is the only reality. So like if you're like, I don't know what happens if I come out, I don't know what's going to happen if I'm like my sparkliest self, why don't you just try it and see what happens, you know? Like there are a lot of terrible things that happen to queer people, but there are better and safer ways of being queer now because of other people putting themselves on the line before. And so maybe that's your turn, you know, like not your turn for violence, but your turn to take the risk of vulnerability. And I'm so grateful for the ways in which it is different to be a queer person in 2024 than it was in 1998 when I came out. So that's my coming out episode for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for your time, your treasure, and your talent towards the world that we're building, because we didn't come here to fix a broken world. We came here to create the world of our dreams. And for me, my dream is that I mean, I already told you my dream, but like, I really hope that you just lean into your authentic self and just start playing around with it, because there's so much on the other side of just really being a person of great joy and light and truth. And I love you all so much. It's my joy to do this podcast, and my joy that you listen to it and subscribe and share with your friends and post it on your social media, because word of mouth truly is the very, very best advertising. And I appreciate you. Bye, everybody.